Okay. Welcome. And so we've got Sean Stone here. Let's welcome Sean. Kristan Harris. Welcome, Kristan Harris. And Kingsley Edwards. Welcome, Kingsley. So we're kicking off the Independent Movement Media and Narrative panel here today. And really the concept of what this panel is about, we have one mic, we're just going to share down the line and really brainstorm out loud here. It's the concept is the right and left have established narratives and media distribution channels. The independent sector will never compete with the two-party system until we powerfully ramp up our media narrative capacities. Once we do, we will be able to lead independently. So I would like to take a moment here just to have these gentlemen introduce themselves and let us know their background and what they do. Please start, Sean.
Okay. I started off, I guess, really being born into media. I was on film sets since I was 6 months old in Salvador and Platoon and acting in Wall Street and The Doors and JFK as a little kid. Going into documentary in my late teens, which ultimately led to my own filmmaking career, and doing a lot more documentaries thereafter over the last decade, working with Conspiracy Theory, the TV show with Jesse Ventura, which sort of spun into what became Buzzsaw on YouTube and then on Gaia for a few years, and also hosting Watching the Hawks on RT America for about 5 years. And as I mentioned, that gave me the opportunity to do quite a few documentaries with RT and some subsequent documentaries in the last couple of years. So I currently am sort of freelance in the sense that the hosting that I do is I do interview conversations that are interesting to me with people. I post on my Patreon, because my YouTube channel was censored last year, and Facebook also took down my page, and it was all kind of shenanigans that went on. So anyway, I've pretty much moved away from the YouTube, Facebook juggernauts, really trying to focus on posting through like Rumble and BitChute. I still use Instagram because they haven't censored me yet, even though it's part of Facebook, but who knows? I hope we can build something out that's competitive and comparable to what Instagram is. I think that there are some people out there with vision for that, but it takes time. So that's a little bit of who I am, and I'll give it to Kristan.
Give it up for Sean. My name is Kristan Harris. I'm an independent journalist and reporter. I do talk radio 5 days a week normally, and I have been blessed to be able to share a wonderful adventure with Free and Equal Elections Foundation, who's hosted this event. Give it up for our sponsors, by the way, the people that can make this possible, Ahura and the Independent Union. Appreciate you guys for what you guys do and put out. It's a hard uphill battle being an independent journalist. And I guess a little bit about me. Growing up, I was a touring musician for 7 years. May not look like it, the Vans Warped Tour. Heavily involved in entertainment. And somehow along the way, I ended up finding out that a lot of things that I perceived and was educated on as a child was incorrect. And I started to look around and go, well, I wonder what else they're lying to me about, and it's okay to be a free thinker. And along the way, I developed a sense of urgency. Some people call it a crusader gene, to really just bring raw data and raw news to people. Because if you think about it, if we're out there and we're eating GMO information or bad information, what kind of crops in our mind are we going to grow? We're going to grow poisonous crops. We're going to have incorrect ideas. And the main idea is to give you guys that organic information so that you guys can make genuinely good decisions and understanding and grow healthy crops in your mind and make good decisions of what is right and what is wrong. And a lot of times that involves bringing in all information on the right and the left. I've never been really affiliated wholeheartedly with any political party, which makes it really difficult being an independent, because if you cover, let's say, a conservative event, you must be a pot-smoking liberal, and if you cover a liberal event, you must be a nationalist conservative, because you're not one of the two parties. And in all reality, I don't have bias of either or. I have my own personal bias, but none that it really adopt on an umbrella of beliefs. So I started out doing this, and since then my ride has been crazy. I've reached hundreds of millions of people, covering raw footage, covering sometimes volatile places like Kenosha. I recently was a witness in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. I covered the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, which no one wanted to cover. There was a handful of journalists there who wanted to bring information about trafficking and what was going on with blackmail operations within our own corrupt government. And I continue to bring raw data, whether it's conservative or liberal, and cover all these events so that you guys can see what people really believe, not what we're told that they believe, and what generally the overall consensus and energy of certain movements are. Because without people that are out there giving you raw information, just think about all the misinformation that we've been told, just even on Ukraine. You could probably list 5 or 6 misinformation that has been aggregated by media that we trust. And what's scary is they went to college, and I get held to a higher standard. I get a 30-day ban. Sean gets demonetized, and the media can lie all they want, but people like us who are trying to bring you genuine news, they might find it uncomfortable, and they'll just ban us just because they don't like us, not because it's misinformation, but based on opinion. So since then, I've been doing a show called The Rundown Live, and we've navigated social media. We've been banned from so many platforms. It's unbelievable. And it's all been under the guise of spreading information. And the information that we spread ended up being in majority true. We've never been out there to give you guys misinformation. The whole goal is to give you raw information so you guys can make decisions of what is real and what is not, and what is true and what is not. It isn't up to the media or the government to dictate that to you. You need to think for yourself, because if you don't, somebody else will think for you.
Hi, I'm Kingsley Edwards, and I'll go way back, but I think it's relevant. So I joined the military after 9/11, and I got brainwashed with that whole lie, and became a Ron Paul Republican back in 2008, 2012. And if we all would have voted for Ron Paul, we wouldn't be in a lot of this mess that we're in now, just letting you know. Became a libertarian. Anyway, got into crypto in 2012, 2013. Been an entrepreneur in that space since. And more recently, we're developing a free speech social media platform based on, really the tenets of this country and free speech and everything that's really going wrong with the media, a lot of things that they've already gone over. My wife and I, we decided to jump into this space, which is like the hardest thing to accomplish, honestly, against big tech. But we're doing really well. We've been launched since July 2019, and we have some great creators on our space. I saw like G. Edward Griffin and a bunch of other people we saw videos for this project that are on our platform as well. And yeah, I mean, we're here to really support, especially content creators, and all this misinformation that's really driven from government and big tech. And a lot of our friends, they built up their YouTube channels. I was kind of a fanboy of a lot of these people for years and years, since the Ron Paul days. And we just saw them get destroyed overnight for no reason, literally getting emails where it says, "We banned you because blank." So it's kind of just crazy. And we just, we felt that it was the right thing to do to start this project. So we welcome all of you to join. It's called joinflote.com. You can go and sign up, and we have a bunch of wonderful people on there.
It's interesting you bring up Dr. Ron Paul, and really the quote that he came up with is that if we're ever to bring about revolutionary changes, I'd like to drop the R and say evolutionary changes. He said 2 things would need to be involved: the youth and music. It was that quote that inspired the creation of United We Stand, amongst many other things. And to hear what we have of this panel here, the common denominator is censorship. We clearly have censorship. I'd like to hear a little bit, whoever wants to go first, about firsthand the sort of censorship that you have dealt with, and really transition into more of how we can really shift this dimension into more of a political open source, a narrative where people can be heard. But let's talk about what you've gone through. And I also want to talk about, again, yeah, the importance of dimensions of independent political narrative. So both of them together.
So censorship is something that I took seriously since I was young, because I'd really seen it with my father's film JFK, and not in the sense that obviously the film came out and it wasn't manipulated by the studio at that time. Thankfully, Warner Brothers gave him the leeway. I think he was one of the few directors that actually had the power of final cut, it's called, in the industry. Most directors don't have that power to really choose the final film that you get to see. It's rare. Most directors don't get that privilege. It's reserved for producers in the studio. So that's why a lot of times, growing up watching movies, you'll see, I did a documentary on this called Hollywood DC, which was on RT America. It's just been, RT America has been taken off YouTube. So now it's on Rockfin and Rumble and the places that I have there. But we get into how much censorship goes on in media, especially not just Mockingbird media, which is to say CIA paid journalists and the networks, because that's a whole other buzzsaw. The show Buzzsaw was called Buzzsaw because there was a great book called Into the Buzzsaw by a collection of journalists, about a dozen journalists, recounting their experiences as journalists, looking into stories, trying to break stories, be it the TWA Flight 800, for example, being bombed, or a missile hitting that flight in Long Island. That was denied for 2 decades. I think it's finally come out more recently that this plane did not just break up in midair or some weird accident. No, it was hit with a missile. But journalists, in the 90s looking into that were censored by their editors and other things. Gary Webb was a famous journalist covering the Contra cocaine stories, and there's just dozens like this. The Environment. I mean, real good journalists going up against the system of the editor class, who basically are beholden to the board, to the corporations that own the major media outlets, that are basically saying, no, this is the Council on Foreign Relations version of reality that we have to show you. And they would kill the stories brought by the editors. So there was a great book, Into the Buzzsaw, that inspired the Buzzsaw. So I knew this going in, but also movies. A lot of the movies that we saw as kids, were manipulated. There was, military, it was be Pentagon or CIA or FBI or any number of agencies manipulating the story to make sure that it was giving you the government approved version of reality. So as a kid seeing, JFK and what happened in the aftermath, it wasn't the fact that the studio let the film come out, but the media came after the film across the board as fiction, fantasy, attacking my father and using very manipulative tactics that we've become used to, I think, in the last decades, becoming more and more used to seeing how the media lies. It's like the fact checkers, they take one phrase that's wrong. They take one sentence and take it out of context, right? They do their best to, it's called sophistry, and 2,000 years ago it was called sophistry by the Greeks, and Plato and Socrates were fighting the sophists, because the sophists have no principles, they have no allegiance to truth or sincerity. Their only intention and their endeavor is to fool you, is to use logic and misdirection and nuance to spin a web, to spin a story, to tell you something, to manipulate your conception of reality. So I understood essentially censorship from that time, and it's only gotten worse over the decades, as we've seen now. It's obvious, it's in our face when we talk about the medical censorship last year. We saw it with Alex Jones a few years ago, and we thought, oh, Alex Jones is crazy, they'll never come for me. But it always starts that way. Once they start to silence one person, it just goes from there, and it just snowballs. So yeah, this is nothing, as I say, this 1984 reality is, we've been living it for a long time. Those of us that have been aware of conspiracies and been aware of the corruption within our government and large corporations. And we've just, essentially we've been out here trying to cry, the voices crying in the wilderness. And oftentimes we are kept in the wilderness, but I think more and more people are looking to the wilderness, realizing there's a lot of truth coming from the wilderness.
Yeah, censorship is something that we've had to tackle because people generally are scared of certain viewpoints a lot of times. It's under the guise of misinformation, but what I found out as a person who's been sourced by Snopes, PolitiFact, and many fact-checking websites, a lot of times now they've become desperate to be able to flag things on social media by saying mostly correct or here's more context. Maybe that will help you change your mind because this is the narrative we want you to believe in. And for a while, it actually backfired. They were saying people would click on those articles more, Facebook said. But as we've seen through education, amongst other things, people have begun to really trust the establishment. And I want to just be honest and say that I'm always interested in teaching you guys to govern yourself, to think for yourself, because it's really about freedom of the mind for you to decide what is true and what is not true, be able to make decisions and watch videos. And if you want to believe something and you find out it's misinformation, that's part of the learning process. Not until, the last 6-7 years have we seen such censorship, specifically designed to target independents. You don't see Fox or CNN get 90-day bans or 60-day bans or, flags not allowed to post on the internet. No, they're allowed to aggregate and have an echo chamber. And if you notice, none of these major news agencies ever really correct themselves. Like, there's people out there today that still believe lies because news agencies put something in the back lines of a paper or silently mention days later. And we need to root out that cognitive dissonance and our own logical fallacies because we all believe misinformation. It just happens with us, eating this information and wanting to have all information so we can make good decisions in our lives. And so a lot of times it becomes a very difficult process. So the question is what's the benefit of censorship? All throughout the last 20 years, everything has been for our safety. We had the Patriot Act, which wasn't really patriotic. That was for our safety. Now they got metadata, which artificial intelligence needs to use in order to identify what your social credit score is. And if you don't know what social credit scores are, that's your new credit score that's coming out that will allow you to go and live in certain areas, be able to purchase certain things, maybe even go into certain clubs. And that's already being instigated and put into place in America under the terms of citizen threat score and law enforcement fusion centers. There's just so much information that's done for our safety. The TSA touches women in ways that I would be irate if anyone touched my wife or child that way. But we think it's okay every time we fly in the airport. We've become conditioned to accept government infringing on our liberties when they have no right. And we need to take that back. And it starts by taking back your mind. Majority of Americans sometimes don't even have an original thought in a day. They're hungry. They see a McDonald's sign. What do? They pull into McDonald's. They feel like French fries. They don't sit and try to think about, hey, what could I make at home? Or what could I create with my mind? We don't use it anymore. Instead, most people don't even read articles anymore. They just read the titles, right? We share just titles. That's it. These days, we don't even read the article. It supports what we believe. Here, read this. And then sometimes you read the article and it's not even what the title says. So it's crazy where people get information and how we digest it, because it also comes out in our lives. It comes out in our conversations. It comes out in our relationships with other individuals. And we've gotten to the point where people aren't even willing to have civil conversations and being able to agree to disagree. It becomes vocally violent. It becomes something that has become biased, and to the point where families are destroyed because one family has a Bernie Sanders sign, the other one has a Trump sign. Maybe we get an INU sign in one of some of these yards one of these days. But they shouldn't be fighting over these things. We should be able to have civil conversations. We should be able to still be nice to our neighbors and learn to have communication so we can understand why we have our differences. I guarantee you there's everyone in this crowd at one point had a conservative ideology or liberal ideology that they no longer hold because they had a conversation with somebody that they didn't agree with. And the question is what kind of soil do we have in our mind, and what are we planting there? And why are we planting it there? And having these conversations allows us to really see what seeds we plant and how it grows in our mind. And censorship is preventing basic thought for our children. It's preventing basic thought for the people out there. So all we're really doing is we're becoming programmed. That's why they call it TV programming. Who are they programming? They're programming you. It's not just shows, it's TV programming, it's television, it's the television tells you lies. And that's really essentially what it is. And it's now moved into the form of our cell phone, where everything we get and everything we know is on our little, like little, what is it? I would call it almost like a ankle bracelet. They know where you go, any place, anytime. We become okay with that. It's for your safety, right? Everything is for your safety. And we need to ask, how many liberties and freedoms are we willing to give up? Because the government never gives those back, not without a fight. And the question is how are we going to do it peacefully? And where are we going to get our information from if at one point all of our media is indoctrinated? Because that's where we're going. They're banning whole news agencies. They're not just banning Alex Jones anymore. They're banning like complete news agencies across the world. And they don't want you to have information. And I'm not saying that information is good or bad, but we should have the right to have access to all information, make good decisions in our life. So censorship is really destroying the fabric of who we are as a nation and what the United States stands for. And I think that censorship, what's freedom of speech if you have no freedom of reach, right? I want you guys to think about that.
So another Ron Paul quote is, truth is treason and an empire of lies. And I really believe that. And looking back, like censorship, how much it affected my life, I mean, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, I got brainwashed with the whole mainstream 9/11 narrative. So I joined the military, lost my best friend. My father's been in prison for over 30 years with a 6-year sentence for the misinformation for nonviolent drug crime, for the misinformation regarding drugs. More recently, we've had friends, like I've mentioned, that are content creators that have spent the last 5-10 years building up their channels and businesses on YouTube or other big tech social media platforms, completely taken down overnight for no reason, no justification whatsoever. More recently, I mean, it used to kind of piss me off, all this censorship. Now that we have our own, social media platform, I'm like, okay, keep pissing people off, big tech, because it just drives more people to search for alternatives. I think that's, what this is all about, and what's just so important right now is just creating alternatives for people to again, we're gonna have to, basically rebuild technology from the ground up, internets, power, electricity, social platforms, communities online. And to at least be able to opt out of the current system, because the current system, I just call it clown world. It's whenever I can't even watch the news anymore. It's just crazy. I do for a laugh, actually. It's kind of like my new Comedy Central. But yeah, I guess that's all I got.
Yeah, several years. Actually, when 9/11 happened, I mentioned earlier, and Patriot Act, NDA came about, it was very clear to me that it was inevitable censorship would come about on social media. So it was strategic at that point in time to put most, if not almost all of our effort towards building events from the ground up, because real change, a friend of mine we lost last year, Mr. Ed Asner, he told me at a candidates forum, he came to my hometown of Cambria, and he said, real change begins from the bottom up. And that's what we're doing here today. These 3 gentlemen have been wrongfully censored intentionally because they were speaking their truth. Freedom of speech has been stifled, clearly. And we're here today because we're breaking through that. We're at this venue today because we're not going to be suppressed by the system. We're going to have voices for all on our platform as this tour evolves. And it was years prior to the shutdown which the shutdown didn't come as a surprise to me, when individuals in charge of the Mind Unleashed, Nick Burnaby, Joe Martino of Collective Evolution, and Jason Bassler, love you, man. He's managing our social media pages right now, a Free Thought Project. He's been shut down 4 times. He's on Free Thought Project 4.0. These gentlemen had tens of millions, modestly, and more. And they lost everything, or revenue. And they said it started changing with censorship. Again, years before the lockdown, they told me that there was a push for pro-pharmaceutical. And they had never seen so much money funneled into the social media that pushed for people to be, well, at that time, they were not for pharmaceutical. I misspoke completely. People were not for pharmaceutical. And suddenly there was like so much money, they said, being pushed into the social media networks to spin people from being against pharmaceuticals to pro. And I'm like, oh, here it comes. This was years prior. Hence the continuation of pushing through the Herculean obstacle. Sean Stone was with us in 2014. Always giving free and equal elections, United We Stand, myself, the benefit of the doubt. Having seen UCLA, the establishment, wrongfully shutting down, breaching contract, canceling United We Stand's first annual event, the Poly Pavilion. We were slated to have 10,000 people. It was happening. We had Public Enemy, the whole band, founding members of Wu-Tang Clan, Larry King, the whole Chuck D, Brother Ali, Immortal Technique, Larry King, I say the Marianne Williamson, Dennis Kucinich, Dr. Bronner's, David Bronner. The list went on and on. Ben and Jerry. We welcome all of them to join this tour that will build into a coalition, might I add. And so these are some of the few that are still standing strong. Really, their revenue, right? Let's thank them for doing that. And Jason Bassler, Free Thought Project, he's doing it too, standing strong. So I really want to wrap up this panel with, can you tell us what you're working on now on overcoming these odds and how we can support you? Give us your links, your Patreon detail. Please support these guys.
It's very sweet. Thank you, Christina. And just to remind people, I mean, imagine UCLA shutting down United We Stand at that point, right? Or South by Southwest shutting down this event because they don't like one of our speakers. Think about that. Take that thought into your mind. What does that mean about what the media tells you about reality? When you can comprehend that censorship at this low level, a few hundred thousand, maybe a few thousand people has to be censored. An event around a few thousand people has to be censored. Imagine when you have billions of dollars at stake. You think they're telling you the truth. Please, people need to wake up. It's in our faces. If they're willing to go to this low a level, to silence, to suppress, why? Why? The system cannot hold if people see the reality. If they realize the emperor has no clothes. If they understand that the power is in our hands, not theirs. Billion-dollar corporations mean nothing without the consumers. Every time you choose to go and buy from one of these large corporations or interface with one of these major platforms, you're empowering them. When has Facebook ever written you a check? When has Instagram ever given you money back? When has YouTube ever given you money? And granted, for some of these bigger users, they get a little bit, but it's always about the platform making the profit. And even Patreon too, which I use. But the point is, we are moving forward in new directions to break away from this, I say, a juggernaut, because that's the point. We have the power. There are millions, hundreds of millions, probably billions of us across the planet that want freedom of trade and expression and energy, because money is just energy. If we choose where we put our energy, our thoughts, the food we put into our bodies, we change our reality. And that's where I'm focused in terms of the work I'm doing, whether it's interviews, storytelling, workshops, master classes. People just, if you can follow me on seanstone.info, subscribe to my website. I'm on social media, sure, on Instagram, Twitter, but I think seanstone.info is a great place to see my work, to connect with me directly, to keep up. Patreon is there. All the links are there. So I would urge seanstone.info. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, let's see. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to stay out of danger because I always seem to find out put myself in volatile situations since I'm a very well-known protest journalist. I probably covered over 150 protests, but basically what's next for me is we're trying to find a way to grow the operation. The rundownlive.com was started out with police accountability, amongst other things, as a main focus, has grown to the point where we've gotten hundreds of millions of views. Even though we get censored, we're still getting thousands of views. And I'm on the radio 5 days a week. So if you're interested in support people like Sean and support somebody like Kingsley, who's making a difference, in the United We Stand festivals out there. Not all of you guys out there have the opportunity every day to be on the grind and fighting at the front lines on the radio 5 days a week. So you guys can contribute and help in many different ways, whether it's sharing a live feed, calling into a program, But if you guys want to know what I'm up to, you can find that at therundownlive.com, therundownlive.com. And to be honest, most of you guys out there may have seen some of my footage and may not even known it. I'm always out there in the front lines trying to give you guys raw information, regardless if it's a conservative movement or a liberal or independent. And my main goal is I just want you guys to have good, healthy information so you guys can grow positive ideas in your mind. And hopefully we can continue to do that, as we're one of the few radio programs out there that are 100% listener provided. And we're provided and funded by you guys. So it's not like I'm getting money from the government like NPR, or getting, money from some big conservative or liberal movement. I'm just here from listeners. Small donations is what we survive on. And it's not like I'm driving around in a Porsche. I live day to day just like everyone else. And my whole heart and my whole passion is just bringing you guys genuine news. And we've been able to do it for 12 years because locals have found us. At one point, we were ranked one of the top 3 talk radio programs in Milwaukee, because I'm out of Milwaukee. If you haven't noticed the funny accent, I'm not Canadian, but we're pretty close. We're near the UP there. And so I appreciate you guys. And, freedom comes in many shapes and forms. And, all tyranny needs for freedom to be dissolved is for good people to do nothing. And I think that we've seen a lot of that here. So if you guys want to follow me, you guys know where to find me. You can find my podcast anywhere they're found: Spotify, iHeartRadio, and videos are located everywhere. But at the very least, support people here, support people who will make a difference. And I'll be honest, nobody agrees with everyone on everything, right? We all have differences, and it's how we are able to have civil conversations. We can learn from each other and become a very cohesive nation instead of a very divided nation. We got to learn to come together, even with our biggest adversaries. I think of the chessboard where we have the, I know it sounds like funny, but you had Professor X and, was it Magneto sitting there playing chess, the 2 adversaries of good and evil. And it's okay. And I'm not saying one side is good or evil, but it's okay to sit down with people you don't agree with to try to understand, because sometimes you sit there and it doesn't hit you until you've done the research that you can be wrong too. And we're, like I said, we all have cognitive dissonance, logical fallacies. So.
Like I mentioned, you can support us. Our social media platform, joinflote.com, takes 2 seconds to sign up, and we have some really big, exciting things that we're going to be doing this year. Especially if you're an investor or whatever, feel free to reach out to me at king@flote.app. And yeah, we just, I call the Flote equation: free speech plus free market equals free people. And that's what we truly believe. And everybody on our team is at least very supportive of free speech. And we see what's going around us. And we want just people to, like you mentioned, just communicate with each other. Because when you get rid of that, then the only tendency, I think it was a JFK quote, it leads to violence, obviously. So, and that's not what we want. So again, joinflote.com, and really appreciate you having us here.
Thank you, gentlemen. And Sean being there in 14 and seeing that cancellation, what he did see is that the show still went on. And you're seeing it this time again, 8 years later. A cancellation at a venue, or being told our keynote speaker cannot be there because of corporate money not wanting him there, Netgear and others, South by Southwest not wanting him there. So we're out of there. We're not leaving our keynote speaker. We're not going to censor him. We're going to be here at the venue where JP Sears performs. It took 4 years. It was thank goodness to the connection through Colin Cantrell of Nexus. I found 4 law firms. The 4th one filed a suit against UCLA for breach of contract within 4 years of the 4-year statute. That is, within 4 days. That is, we won. The arbitrator ruled UCLA breached the contract. I turned down the huge money offer, which would have required a confidentiality agreement, took the risk, and got the win. Not a huge settlement, but I could care less, because we protected the integrity of this foundation, and we have the ability to release all of those emails that the administration did. They intentionally stifled free speech because Public Enemy was a part of that, and because we're united, we stand. And we had the same experience on Friday, and we have overcome. We shall overcome. I thank you very much. Let's give a big hands out to our panelists. Thank you again. Thank you. Please support these gentlemen. Thank you.